Right, let's talk insurance now. Emir Mujkic is Director and Lead Analyst for Insurance Ratings at S&P Global Ratings, based here in the UAE, and joins us now on the line from Abu Dhabi. Emir, good morning. Thanks very much indeed for being with us.
Good morning, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Emma, keen to talk to you about your new report at S&P Global Ratings about the regional insurance industry. You say insurance companies plough ahead even as geopolitical tensions intensify. Now, this report came out independent of the storms that we had last week, and we will get to it. First of all, though, what's your quick take at S&P in terms of the impact of the storms on the local insurance industry?
Yeah, so look, I think that's the $1 million question at the moment. Everyone is looking to get a number or share a number. I think what we can say at this point in time, obviously, looking at the storm last week, the economic damage was significant. But that said, I think we think the insurance losses are probably more on the manageable side. And why we are saying that is because, if you look at the motor insurance cases, we know that usually floods are only covered under the comprehensive policy. So many people don't have comprehensive covers. And then also there are some limitations within the comprehensive policies. Typically, they only pay if a vehicle is parked. Then property covers are typically reinsured. The premiums are passed through to international reinsurers. And we also know that a lot of people don't have home insurance. So it will be a big loss for insurance companies in the region, and particularly in the UAE. We do understand that companies are still gathering data. We spoke with some of the larger insurance companies last week. But it's still too early to give any indication in terms of loss. But it's fair to say that not all the risks and losses are insured, and some of the insured losses will be passed on to international reinsurers.
In terms of who's insuring, particularly if we look at cars, you mentioned those at the moment, is that mainly insured by local companies based here in the UAE or by international names?
So those type of risks would usually be insured by local companies. The retention for risks like car insurance is relatively high. So that means risks would be retained by local companies. But what often happens is if there's an accumulation of claims, let's say if 10, 20, 30 cars are damaged because of the same event, there could be a reinsurance protection that kicks in, so-called excess of loss cover, which then up to a certain amount is covered by local insurance companies, and then it gets ceded on to international reinsurers. So all in all, I think what I'm trying to say is that losses are probably limited, for local insurers. But that said, especially companies that write a lot of motor business, for them, the picture may be a little bit more different than for companies that write less motor insurance business.
Finally, on the storms, before we get onto your report, a lot is made of how governments declare a national incident like the one that we had last week with the storms here in the UAE, whether it's considered force majeure, whether it's considered a national emergency or so on. That can sometimes impact what insurance companies do or do not have to pay out for. What's the situation in general, and what are the specifics here in the UAE at the moment when it comes to the classification of what exactly happened last week?
I think the classification usually is important when it comes to business interruption. The business interruption covers would typically kick in under property insurance. So, for example, if a mall is not operational and a mall needs to be closed, then I believe a business interruption cover may kick in. But we also know that, and I think, we have to really thank everyone who's helped clean up after the storm in the UAE. I was in Dubai yesterday. I live in Abu Dhabi. And I have to say 95% of the roads are back to normal. All the malls are open again. So clearly, it was a big event, but it seems like that business as usual is underway. I know the airport was closed, or at least a lot of flights were canceled. But again, it doesn't seem that to be the case that there was a long interruption period in terms of business, which again means that the insurance protection and insurance payouts could be limited.
Emir, let's look more broadly at the insurance industry here in the UAE. Your report came out on the 17th of April, so it was written and signed off before the storms happened. And you say it's, broadly speaking, looks like a strong picture for the GCC insurance market. You say their top-line growth is expanding between 5 and 15% this year.
Yes, that's right. So, and that's quite substantial. And looking backwards, in 2023, we saw even faster growth, particularly in markets like Saudi Arabia, the UAE. We've seen now double-digit growth for a number of years. Saudi Arabia grew by 25% last year and the year before as well, due to numerous reasons. Obviously, we all know that the economy is doing quite well. Oil prices is relatively high. There has been an extension of mandatory medical covers, an extension of infrastructure projects, leading to obviously an increase in insurance demand. And then at the same time, we have also seen an increase in motor rates in Saudi Arabia in particular, but also in the UAE in the second part of the year. If we think back to 2020, 2021, we do know that there were fewer claims, particularly on the motor insurance side. What happened back then is a lot of insurance companies introduced discounts, but because the economy has returned to normal, the number of claims has gone up, the frequency of claims has gone up, and as a result of that, a lot of insurance companies have been forced to adjust their prices and rates. So those were really the main drivers. I think for this year, we see a similar picture. Insurance demand is still strong. Infrastructure projects are still going on. We have seen some adjustments again for motor and medical rates, also some extension of covers. So those would be the main drivers in our view this year in terms of premium growth.
Less than a minute left with you. Traditionally here in this region, when I've been covering this story, it's been one of underinsurance. Insurance as a percentage of GDP much lower in the Gulf region than to other more mature economies. Is that still the case, and is the gap narrowing?
It is still the case, but the gap is narrowing. I think the main underinsurance is on the P&C side to some extent. Home insurance, I think, following the storm in the UAE. Property and casualty, okay. Apologies. So non-life insurance, in other words. So home insurance, we all know that penetration rates are very low. I think there will be a surge towards that cover following the storm. We also know that on the life insurance side, there's a big gap, particularly in some countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia. That's for cultural reasons, but also the government obviously is not particularly pushing.
Emir, we're going to have to leave it there. Fascinating conversation. Appreciate your time. The thoughts of Emir Mujkic there from S&P Global Ratings, talking insurance. Coming up next, more impact or more analysis of the impact of the rain.
Dubai Eye 103.8.
Join the conversation.